Vex Corin considered herself the luckiest prisoner on Iron Circlet, which, as far as standards go, was like winning a beauty contest in a leper colony. The megaprison orbited some forgotten rock in a forsaken corner of the galaxy. The kind of place you ended up when every other option had flickered out like a cheap hologram. To call it desolate would be an insult to desolation. "Hey, Vex. You find anything yet or just more space dust?" came the crackling voice of her partner, Jack Slater, over the comm. He had the kind of voice that could sandpaper rust off an old bolt and a personality to match. "Just the usual," Vex replied, wiping sweat off her brow. "Rocks, more rocks, oh, and surprise, a bit more rock." "Hold onto your helmet, Jax. This could be a wild one." "Let me know when you find something that'll pay off our indentured servitude," Jax grunted. "I ain't getting any younger." "Neither are these rocks," Vex shot back, stifling a grim smile. She clanked her way through the dimly lit corridors, her exploration gear making her look like a malfunctioning beetle. Iron Circlet's walls were a patchwork of repairs, a testament to humanity's ability to slap a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and call it fixed. "Keep your eyes peeled, Vex," Jax's voice buzzed in her ear. "Heard there are ghosts of ancient aliens around. Maybe they'll give us a bloody map out here." "Right," Vex snorted, squinting at her scanner. "If I see any ghost, I'll ask for directions to the nearest exit or maybe a stiff drink." The drill hummed in her hands, the vibrations numbing her fingers. That's when her scanner pinged, a sound she hadn't heard in months. Something was behind the wall ahead, a hidden chamber, untouched and unnoticed amidst the dreary expanse of the prison. It was the kind of thing that got Vex's blood pumping. Not that it took much, a stiff breeze would do these days. "Got something, Jax," she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. "Something solid." "You sure it ain't just another rock?" Jax inquired skeptically. "If it is, it's the densest damn rock in this floating hell," Vex replied, stepping closer. She set the drill against the wall, and within moments the concrete gave way to reveal a hidden chamber. Jax, now thoroughly intrigued, breathed heavily into his comm. "What do you see?" "Something old," Vex whispered, stepping inside. "And probably dangerous. The two things that keep life interesting." The chamber was a stark contrast to the rest of Iron Circlet. A gleaming alien technology practically screamed at her from every surface. Wires snaked across the walls like glittering vipers, and at the center, a pulsating artifact sat on a pedestal. Vex couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine, as if the universe itself had stopped to watch. "You never mentioned you had a taste for antiques," Jax chuckled nervously on the other end. "Yeah, well, this one's got a certain charm," Vex mused, approaching the artifact. It looked like a twisted lump of metal glowing faintly with a sickly green hue. It didn't scream, "Touch me," but then curiosity had always been Vex's vice. "Be careful, Vex," Jax warned. "Last thing we need is you waking up some ancient horror." "Relax, you giant worrywart," Vex replied, reaching out. Her fingers brushed against the artifact, and for a moment she felt nothing. Then something clicked in the back of her mind, a cold whisper promising not satisfaction but chaos. The chamber rumbled, the walls vibrating as if in laughter. Jax," Vex said, nerves creeping into her voice, "I might have done something." "What have you done, Vex?" Jax groaned. The lights flickered, alarms blaring through the prison's tannoy system. "Oh, just unleashed a cosmic entity," Vex quipped, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Figured we could use a little excitement." "This ain't good," Jax muttered, voice breaking through the static. "I think you might have woken up the whole damn prison." "Yeah," Vex replied, staring at the now violently pulsating artifact. "And here I thought alien technology would be boring." The prison systems were reacting as if it had an itch it couldn't scratch. Vex stumbled back from the artifact, realizing she'd stepped into a mess far stickier than she had anticipated. A cosmic entity was the kind of problem that required more than a roll of duct tape and a stiff drink. "We need to figure out what this thing is," Vex said, heart pounding like a drum solo gone awry. "You think?" Jax replied, his voice a mix of panic and sarcasm. "Maybe turn it off before it decides to end us all." Vex stared at the artifact, now pulsating faster, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. She was suddenly aware of every flaw, every crack, every imperfection in herself and the prison around her. "I'm open to suggestions," she said, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. "Got any bright ideas?" "Run," Jax suggested dryly. "Run fast." With a reluctant nod, Vex backed out of the chamber, the artifact's glow searing into her retinas. The corridors of iron circlet seemed to twist and warp around her, the prison itself groaning under the strain of its new cosmic guest. "This is gonna be one hell of a report," Vex muttered, sprinting down the hallway. She could hear the alarms echoing through the prison, a haunting symphony of impending doom. She reached Jax at the control room, his face a mask of disbelief. He slapped the side of a malfunctioning monitor as if it could somehow change their fate. "What the hell did you touch, Vex?" he demanded, though there was no real anger in his voice, just the kind of weariness that comes from dealing with one disaster too many. Vex shrugged, her shoulders moving more out of reflex than anything. "I found a shiny thing." It seemed like a good idea at the time. "Yeah, well, your good ideas suck," Jax quipped, though a faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Let's just hope this one doesn't get us killed." The control room vibrated as if shaking its head in disbelief. Jax punched a few buttons, the screens flickering from static to chaos. "Can you shut it down?" Vex asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jax gave her a look that said, "Are you kidding?" "I'm a mechanic, not a miracle worker," he said, though his hands moved with practiced precision. "Is it working?" Vex asked, half hopeful, half expecting the worst. "Define working," Jax replied, grimacing as the monitors continued their epileptic dance. Vex leaned against the wall, the cool metal grounding her in reality. "We're screwed, aren't we?" "Screwed would be an understatement," Jax said, his voice cracking like dry wood. "We're well and truly buggered." "Well, at least it'll be an interesting way to go," Vex said, her voice laced with gallows humor. "If we go," Jax replied, tapping at the screens, "we're taking half the galaxy with us." "Always the optimist," Vex replied, her voice light despite the circumstances. "Someone's gotta be," Jax grunted, his focus unwavering. The alarms continued their relentless wailing, a reminder that their time was running out. Vex couldn't help but laugh, a sound that echoed through the control room, almost lost amidst the chaos. "What's so funny?" Jax asked, not looking up from his work. "Just thinking," Vex replied, her smile almost genuine. "If we survive this, drinks are on me." Jax snorted, a sound that was almost a laugh. "Deal," he said, tapping furiously at the controls, "but don't expect any fancy cocktails on this rust bucket." Vex nodded, her eyes fixed on the swirling chaos of the monitors. She'd found the thing that might just end them all, but at least she wasn't alone in this mess. "Jax," she said, her voice steady, "thanks for sticking around." "Just doing my job," Jax replied, though there was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before. They shared a moment of silence, the kind of silence that only comes when you're standing at the edge of the abyss, peering into the unknown. Then, with a determined nod, Jax cracked his knuckles and returned to the controls. "Let's see if we can turn this thing off before it decides to turn us into stardust," Jax said, his voice carrying a hint of hope amid the sarcasm. Vex took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever came next. "Yeah," she said, a smile ghosting her lips. "Let's give it a shot." Together they faced the chaos, two weary souls in a vast, uncaring universe, united by the slim chance of survival and the promise of a drink on the other side. The iron circlet had the atmosphere of a birthday party gone horribly wrong, except birthdays involved cake, not cosmic chaos. Alarms blared like a chorus of angry banshees, the lights engaged in a frenetic disco, and the prison's PA system spat out garbled threats in a voice that sounded suspiciously like a constipated robot. Vex Corin stumbled through the corridors, her ears ringing from the clamor. She might have been the luckiest prisoner on this forsaken hunk of metal, but at the moment, luck felt like a bad joke. The kind you'd laugh at if there weren't an interstellar entity threatening to turn you into space dust. "Vex, You ever think we should have taken up knitting instead of prison breaking? Jax's voice crackled through the calm, a welcome distraction from the catastrophe at hand. Please, we just end up knitting our own nooses. Vex shot back, her feet pounding the metal floor like a drum roll for disaster. What's the situation in your end, Jax? About as stable as a politician's promises, Jax replied, his voice laced with the usual sarcasm. The guards are losing their minds, prisoners are starting to riot, and I swear I saw a cat floating by a minute ago. A cat? Seriously? Vex asked, dodging a panicked inmate. I always knew this place needed more felines. Yeah, and less cosmic doom, Jax retorted. You find any allies yet? If by allies you mean people who won't throw me out the airlock, I'm still looking, Vex said, her lips twisting into a grimace. The artifact stirring up more than just dust bunnies. The prison wasn't just on edge. It was teetering over it, and the view from the precipice was anything but pretty. Each step Vex took felt like treading on a fault line, ready to crack open at any moment. As she rounded a corner, she collided with a guard, Graves, if she remembered right, a man with a face like a kicked-in pumpkin. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated to saucers, and he pointed a trembling finger at her. You're the one who did this, Graves shouted, voice breaking like a poorly tuned guitar. Wow, Graves, ever think of a career in detective work? Vex drawled, sidestepping his shaky attempt to grab her. I didn't realize I was distributing cosmic horror in my spare time. Don't get smart with me, Corin, Graves snarled, though it was hard to take him seriously with his uniform half untucked and a sheen of panic sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. You and your little escapades have brought this down on us. Escapades. You make it sound like I went joyriding in a starship, Vex said, rolling her eyes. Look, I didn't mean to wake up the ancient interstellar terror. It just kind of happened. Tell it to the warden, Graves snapped, his hand wavering near his baton. Yeah, because I'm sure he's got time between playing chess and wrangling demons, Vex replied, sidestepping him again. Face it, Graves, we're all up the creek without a paddle. A distant thud echoed through the corridor, followed by a low, haunting hum that made Vex's skin crawl. The prison was transforming into a haunted house, complete with spectral whispers that only added to the impending sense of doom. I'm starting to miss the days when our biggest problem was running out of toilet paper, Vex muttered, more to herself than to Graves. Leaving the bewildered guard behind, she made her way to the common area, a grand term for a dingy space filled with mismatched seating and flickering screens. Here, prisoners and guards alike huddled in uneasy truce, eyes darting nervously as if the walls would sprout claws at any moment. A familiar face caught her eye, Riggs, the closest thing Vex had to a friend in this floating asylum. He was built like a brick wall with a perpetual scowl that could curdle milk. Corin, he grunted, as if her name were something unpleasant stuck in his throat. Riggs, Vex acknowledged, taking a seat across from him. Enjoying the apocalypse. Yeah, it's like a holiday, he said dryly. Heard you kicked this whole thing off. Nice work. Hey, I aim to please, Vex said, flashing a humorless grin. Any chance we can use this mess to our advantage? Riggs scratched his chin thoughtfully. Maybe. Morale's in the toilet, guards are too busy shitting bricks to keep an eye on us. Could be a chance to make a break for it. Sure, let's just waltz past the cosmic horror and out the front door, Vex said, leaning back and folding her arms. We'd need a plan, and a damn good one. Well, if anyone can come up with a half-baked plan that somehow works, it's you, Riggs replied, a rare glint of amusement in his eyes. Flattery will get you everywhere, Vex said with a chuckle, though the weight of their situation pressed heavily on her shoulders. But first I need to figure out how to put this cosmic genie back in the bottle. And how do you suppose we do that? Riggs asked, raising an eyebrow. Working on it, Vex admitted, tapping her fingers on the table. In the meantime, keep your ear to the ground. If anything useful pops up, I want to know. Got it, Riggs grunted, the scowl never leaving his face. Vex rose, casting a glance around the room. The atmosphere was tense, a thin veneer of civility barely concealing the powder keg beneath. An air of desperation clung to the room, and it wouldn't take much to ignite it. She had to move quickly. Jax was waiting near the exit, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past Ior. "You find anyone willing to help us not die?" "Riggs," Vex said, shrugging. "He might be useful." "Good cause right now. I'd take help from a half-dead zebra," Jax replied, rubbing his temples. "This place is going to hell and fast." "Then let's give ourselves a fighting chance," Vex said, determination sharpening her tone. "We need to learn more about the artifact. Maybe there's something in the Warden's office." "You think the Warden's got a guide to cosmic entities lying around?" Jax scoffed. "Maybe not, but he must have records, something we can use," Vex insisted. "It's that or wait for the thing to decide we're yesterday's lunch." "Fine," Jax relented, pulling out his comm. "Let's see if we can't rustle up something useful before this place goes belly up." They navigated the corridors, the prison's architecture a confusing maze under normal circumstances, now made worse by the cosmic chaos. Doors opened and closed at random, lights flickered like a strobe nightmare, and the air hummed with a dissonant energy that set Vex's teeth on edge. "Remind me why we thought this was a good idea," Jax muttered, ducking under a sparking conduit. "Because doing nothing and dying wasn't an option," Vex replied curtly, pressing onward. "We're going to get through this, one way or another." The Warden's office was as unremarkable as the rest of the prison, just another gray room with a desk piled high with papers, and a console that looked like it predated civilization itself. Vex tapped a few buttons, hoping to coax some semblance of life from the ancient tech. "Hope you're better with that than you are with artifacts," Jax teased, watching as she worked. "Keep talking, I'll let the cosmic horror have you first," Vex shot back, though she couldn't hide the smirk tugging at her lips. The console flickered to life, displaying a dizzying array of files and data. Vex sifted through them, searching for anything that might explain the artifact and its effects on the prison. "Here," she said, pulling up a file marked Unidentified Anomalies. "Looks like the Warden had some idea what was going on. There's mentions of energy fluctuations, strange occurrences." "Sounds like a regular day on Iron Circlet," Jax interjected. "Yeah, but these were different," Vex continued, scrolling through the notes. "There were reports of disturbances long before I found the artifact. Whatever this thing is, it's been here a while, festering." "Great, so we're dealing with a cosmic infection that's been simmering under our noses," Jax grumbled. "How do we stop it?" Vex scanned the file, frustration mounting as she found little in the way of solutions. "I don't know yet, but there must be something. Maybe if we can isolate the artifact, contain its energy." "We don't even know how it works," Jax pointed out. "Then we find out," Vex said, determination set in her jaw. "If we can get the artifact back to the chamber and cut it off from the rest of the prison, it might settle down." "That's a lot of ifs," Jax said, but there was a glimmer of hope in his voice, a faint spark amidst the gloom. "Got a better plan?" Vex asked, raising an eyebrow. "Unfortunately, no," Jax admitted, scratching his head. "Okay, let's give it a shot. Worst case, we all die horribly." "Such optimism," Vex quipped, shutting down the console and turning to leave. "Just calling it like I see it," Jax replied with a shrug, following her out. "Let's hope Riggs and his crew are ready for some backbreaking work." Vex nodded, her mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls alike. If they could pull this off, maybe they had a chance to survive this cosmic nightmare. If not, well, at least they'd go down fighting, and in Vex's book, that was better than nothing. They made their way back through the chaotic halls, the prison still reverberating with the artifact's influence. Strange shadows danced along the walls, and the air carried a chill that seeped into Vex's bones. Yet there was also a sense of purpose, a shared determination among those who refused to surrender without a fight. Riggs met them near the common area, his expression as stony as ever. "You figure out a way to fix this." "We've got a plan," Vex said, outlining their idea to isolate the artifact. "It might work, but we'll need all the help we can get." Sounds like a suicide mission, Riggs remarked, though his eyes glinted with a fierce resolve. But I'm in. Beats waiting around for the end. That's the spirit, Jax said, clapping Riggs on the back. Let's show this cosmic nightmare what we're made of. As they gathered a small group of willing prisoners, Vex felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. They were up against impossible odds, but they weren't alone, and together they just might stand a chance. The prison rumbled around them, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Vex took a deep breath, steeling herself for the battle ahead. "All right," she said, her voice strong and steady. "Let's do this." And with that they set off into the unknown, ready to face the cosmic chaos head-on, armed with determination, grit, and just a little bit of reckless hope. The iron circlet wasn't exactly in its best shape, but then again, neither were its inhabitants. As Vex and her ragtag troupe navigated through the chaos-ridden corridors, the prison system seemed to have developed a sense of humor, or malevolence, of their own. Doors opened to thin air, security drones whirred about like drunken flies, and the lights flickered with the subtlety of a disco on steroids. "Next time, let's plan our suicide mission somewhere with a view," Jax muttered, narrowly dodging a sparking conduit that seemed hell-bent on lighting his hair on fire. "Next time, let's not have a suicide mission," Vex retorted, sidestepping a puddle of something that looked suspiciously biological. Or maybe just skip straight to the drinking. As they trudged on, Vex spotted a figure bent over a console that looked like it had been pulled straight from a junkyard. It was Tava Rehen, the prison's go-to engineer, the kind of person who could make a toaster into a bomb, given enough time and caffeine. Her hair was a mess of curls that defied gravity, much like her personality. "Tava, how's the babysitting going?" Vex called out, earning a snort from the engineer. "Fantastic," Tava replied, not looking up. "The kids are just running wild and everything's on fire. You know, a typical Tuesday, right? Well, we're thinking about inviting a cosmic horror to coffee. Got any tips?" Tava finally straightened, wiping her oil-stained hands on a rag that was doing a terrible job at being clean. "Sure, just don't forget the sugar. They hate bitter stuff. What do you need? Anything that can help us figure out how to talk to this thing, or at least stop it from redecorating the prison in haunt destruction," Vex said. Tava tilted her head, considering. "You might try the comms array. If we can tweak the signal frequencies, maybe we can broadcast a message it can understand. Assuming it has ears. Assuming it has anything resembling human anatomy," Jax added. "For all we know, it's a pissed-off space cloud." "Hey, as long as it's not a space clown, I'm good," Tava said, turning back to her console. "I'll get started on it. Don't go getting yourselves killed before I have something ready. Death is so overrated anyway," Vex replied, leading Jax away. "Let us know when you've got something we can use." They left Tava to her tinkering and continued deeper into the bowels of the prison, which was starting to resemble a haunted house, designed by a mad scientist on a bender. Somewhere along the line, they picked up Fen Siller, a former diplomat who looked like he had wandered into the wrong movie. He was all smooth edges and polished charm, the kind of guy who could sell sand in a desert. "So, cosmic entities," Fen said, falling into step beside them. "I'm guessing they didn't cover this in orientation." "Only the advanced course," Vex replied. "We skipped it for knife fighting." "Right, because why learn to talk when you can just stab things?" Fen's grin was as sharp as his suit, which was somehow still immaculate despite their surroundings. "Exactly," Jax said, "and since you're the smooth talker, maybe you can negotiate it into a corner." "I'll do my best," Fen said, smoothing down his tie. "Though my last negotiation involved a fruit basket, not an existential threat." "Close enough," Vex said, leading them around a corner where the ambient hum grew into a low growl, like the prison itself was pissed off. "Let's hope we can talk this nightmare into a nap." As they pressed on, the air seemed to grow thicker, charged with a static that made the hairs on Vex's arms stand on end. Whatever this entity was, it was growing more active, and its influence rippled through the prison like a pebble dropped into a pond of chaos. "What's the plan if we can't talk it down?" Fen asked, his voice a low murmur against the crackling air. "Plan B is running," Jax said. "Plan C is screaming. Plan D is probably crying. Good to know we've got options," Fen replied, his tone light despite the tension coiling around them. They reached the comms room, a cramped space filled with blinking lights and ancient tech that looked like it had been cobbled together by someone who learned engineering from a cereal box. Tava's voice crackled over Vex's comm, a reassuring presence amidst the digital noise. "Got a frequency for you to try. It's a long shot, but hell, everything's a long shot today." Vex tapped a few buttons, aligning the comm system to the frequency Tava suggested. Here goes nothing. The room filled with a pulsing hum, a sound that seemed to echo in Vex's bones. For a second, she wondered if they'd just pissed off the entity even more. "I think I heard something," Jax said, cocking his head like a dog trying to decipher a new sound. "You sure that wasn't just your stomach?" Fen asked, raising an eyebrow. "Very funny." "No, I'm serious," Jax insisted. "It was like a whisper or a growl. Hard to tell." Vex keyed the mic, speaking into the void. "Hello? Anyone there?" Or anything. The hum shifted, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it felt like the walls were closing in, the air vibrating with an energy that was both alien and familiar. Whatever they'd done, they'd gotten its attention. "I think it's listening," Fen said, his voice barely a whisper. "Great, now what?" Jax asked, his sarcasm failing to mask the underlying tension. "Now we try not to die," Vex said, staring into the abyss, and if she was honest, feeling like it might just stare back. As the comms room thrummed with the entity's presence, Vex realized she was stepping onto a knife's edge. One false move and they could all be cosmic toast, but she hadn't come this far to back down now. "All right," she said, steadying herself, "let's see if we can find out what it wants." The hum morphed into something that almost resembled a voice, though it was more like a feeling, a cascade of impressions that washed over them. Confusion, anger, a desperate search for something lost. Vex frowned, trying to piece it together. "It's looking for something," she said, glancing at Jax and Fen. "Something it lost, like what?" Jax asked. "A cosmic car key, maybe a cosmic home," Fen suggested. "Or I don't know, cosmic sense of purpose. Whatever it is, it's not happy," Vex said, focusing on the impressions. They were jumbled, chaotic, like the entity itself didn't know what it wanted. Or maybe it was just too alien for them to understand. "What do we do?" Fen asked, his diplomat's instinct kicking in. "Offer it a deal, sure," Jax said, leaning against a console. "Tell it to pack up and leave and we'll give it a nice fruit basket." "Actually," Vex said, an idea forming, "that's not the worst idea. Maybe we can offer it a way out. Somewhere else to go. How the hell do we do that?" Jax asked, skepticism written all over his face. "Give me a sec," Vex said, turning back to the console. "If we can tweak the comm signal, maybe we can open a sort of cosmic door." "Cosmic door?" Fen repeated, incredulity in his voice. "You mean like a wormhole or a portal?" Vex said, her fingers flying over the controls. "Something to get it out of here and back to wherever it belongs." "You do know this sounds insane, right?" Jax said. "Even by our standards." "Yep," Vex said, not missing a beat. "But do you have a better idea?" The comms array buzzed, and the air crackled with potential energy. If they were going to do this, they needed to act fast. The entity's presence was growing more intense, the prison systems going haywire as it exerted its influence. "All right," Vex said, taking a deep breath. "Here goes nothing." She adjusted the frequency again, and the comms room vibrated with a low, resonant note that seemed to echo through the prison. It was a sound that spoke of possibilities, of doors opening across the void. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then the air seemed to shift, a subtle change that felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. "Did it work?" Jax asked, his voice hushed. "I think maybe," Vex said, straining to sense any change. The entity's presence wavered, a flicker of uncertainty that rippled through the space around them. Vex could almost feel its confusion, its hesitation, as if it was deciding whether to take the chance they'd offered. "Come on, take the hint," Jax muttered, his eyes fixed on the console. The hum grew stronger, a crescendo that built and built until it seemed like the air itself would burst. Then, with a suddenness that left them all reeling, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, a void where the entity's presence had been. Vex held her breath, waiting for something to happen, for the other shoe to drop. "It's gone," Fen said, amazement in his voice. "Maybe," Vex said, feeling a cautious relief. "Or maybe it's just stepped outside for a bit." "Well, if it's gone, what happens now?" Jax asked, looking around the room as if expecting the prison to fall apart at any moment. "Now," Vex said, letting out a long breath, "we see if the prison holds together without it." As if on cue, the lights flickered back to life, the systems coming online one by one like a waking giant. The prison settled, the chaos receding as order reasserted itself. "Looks like we did it," Fen said, a grin spreading across his face. "Looks like," Vex agreed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. But deep down, she knew the entity's absence was only part of the story. There were still questions, mysteries left unanswered in the wake of its departure. But for now, they'd survived. And in a place like the Iron Circlet, that was victory enough. Vex turned to her companions, a smile cracking her weary features. "Drinks are on me." Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "You know, for a cosmic horror survival team, we did all right." "Damn right we did," Vex said, leading them out of the comms room and into the uncertain future. In the end, the Iron Circlet remained the same, a floating fortress of despair and survival. But for Vex and her odd little crew, it was more than that. It was home, chaos and all. They'd barely made it 10 feet down the dimly lit corridor when Fen's polished shoes clicked to a halt. "You know," he said, adjusting his tie like he was about to give a TED talk on negotiating with cosmic horrors, "I can't help but think we missed something back there. That entity, it wasn't just trying to spook us for kicks, was it?" Jax snorted. "Oh great, the diplomat's having an epiphany. Next thing you'll be telling us it was just misunderstood, needs a hug." "Actually," Vex interjected, her mind racing, "Fen might be onto something. It felt like it was lost. Or incomplete, maybe looking for a way to reconnect with something." "Right," Fen said, nodding. "There was a purpose to its madness. A missing piece, if you will, so what's the plan?" "Send it a get-well-soon card." Jax quipped, but there was a hint of interest beneath the sarcasm. "Not exactly. But maybe give it the cosmic equivalent of a GPS," Vex said, rubbing her temples. "If we can figure out what it lost, maybe we can help it find it, or at least point it in the right direction." "Sounds like a needle in a haystack," Jax muttered. "A cosmic haystack, yeah, but it's our haystack and our lives on the line," Vex replied. "So let's play nice, at least until we know more." They continued down the corridor, the lights flickering with a disturbing regularity that set Vex's nerves on edge. As if the prison was toying with them, daring them to find what lay at its heart, or die trying. They came to a branching junction, the dull hum of machinery vibrating through the floor. Vex stopped, consulting a map on her wrist display that looked as if it had been drawn by a drunken cartographer with a grudge. "All right, we need to head to the control station," she said, glancing at her companions. "If we're going to figure out what's happening, that's our best bet." "Sure," Jax said, rolling his eyes. "Let's head toward the center of chaos." "What could go wrong?" "Everything," Vex replied with a smirk. "But that's what makes it interesting." They pressed on, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The ambience was completed by the prison's PA system, which occasionally spat out garbled threats in a voice that sounded like a malfunctioning toaster. "Whoever's running the show here needs a serious upgrade in communication skills," Fen deadpanned. "Or just a new job," Jax added. "Something involving fewer cosmic threats and more sunny beaches." They turned a corner, stepping into the control station. A cavernous room filled with consoles, screens, and a chaos of wires that suggested whoever built it had a serious problem with organization. And there, standing in the middle of this mess like a king surveying his domain, was Marek Thon. Ah, the illustrious Vex Corin and her merry band of misfits, Thon drawled, his smile oozing with all the sincerity of a used-car salesman. I was wondering when you'd show up. Vex tensed, her instincts screaming at her to be wary. Thon was the kind of man who'd sell his own grandmother for a pair of shiny boots, and then charge her for the privilege. Thon, she said, keeping her voice level. Didn't expect to find you here orchestrating the apocalypse, orchestrating. Oh, Vex, you wound me. Thon's voice was smooth as oil and just as slippery. I'm merely capitalizing on opportunity, Fen asked, folding his arms. You mean the opportunity to turn the prison into a cosmic playpen? Thon waved a dismissive hand. Details. You see, this entity, whatever it is, offers a chance to rewrite the rules. Power, chaos, freedom from the mundane. Isn't that worth a little risk? Yeah, when hell freezes over, Jax muttered. You're playing a dangerous game, Thon, Vex said, her eyes narrowing. One that could get a lot of people killed. Perhaps, Thon replied, his smile widening. But you know what they say, no risk, no reward. Jax leaned in, whispering to Vex. I vote we fast-track him to an airlock. Vex snorted, but Thon's words unsettled her. He wasn't wrong about the potential power of the entity. If controlled, it could tip the balance of power, not just here but everywhere. Listen, Thon, Vex said, her voice tight with frustration. We're trying to fix this mess, not make it worse, fix it. Thon chuckled as if she just told the funniest joke. Oh, Vex, some things aren't meant to be fixed. Sometimes they're meant to be exploited, right? Fen cut in, sarcasm dripping from his voice. Because nothing says good idea like poking an angry cosmic bear, Thon shrugged. I've always been a fan of big game hunting. The tension in the room was palpable, a coiled spring ready to snap. Vex knew they were on the edge of something big, either a breakthrough or a breakdown, and she wasn't keen on finding out which without a plan. You know, Jax said, scratching his chin, this whole situation has me thinking. Dangerous habit, Fen interjected. Yeah, well, it happens. What if we could find this thing's missing piece? It's lost, right? So maybe there's something in the prison's archives or systems that can help us figure out what the hell it's looking for. Thon's eyes glinted with interest, but Vex knew better than to trust that look. He'd support them just long enough to see if their plan worked, then swoop in to take whatever prize he could. Fine, she said, making a decision. We'll play along for now. But if you try anything, yes, dire consequences, pain and suffering, all that jazz, Thon replied with a theatrical sigh. I do love these little threats of yours. I'm serious, Thon, Vex said, her voice low and deadly. Cross us and you'll find out just how serious. Understood, Thon said, a mocking salute accompanying his words. Vex turned away, signaling to Jax and Fen. They needed to find out what the entity wanted, and fast. The prison's mainframe was their best shot, a twisted repository of information that might hold the key to this cosmic riddle. Let's get to work, Vex said, determination hardening her resolve. Fen, see if you can charm the system into talking. Jax, keep an eye on our friendly neighborhood warden here. What about you? Jax asked, a curious look on his face. Me. Vex grinned, tapping into the mainframe. I'm going to see what secrets this place is hiding. They spread out across the control station, a flurry of motion and activity. Screens flickered to life as Fen worked his magic, talking to the system in a low, soothing murmur. Come on, baby, Fen coaxed, give us something good. You know you want to, Jax rolled his eyes. You're flirting with a computer now. What, the cosmic horror not enough for you? Hey, I'll take what I can get, Fen shot back, a wry grin on his face. Vex's focus was unwavering as she delved deeper into the prison's systems. Data streamed by in an endless flow, the electronic innards of the iron circlet laid bare before her. Somewhere in this digital ocean was the truth she sought. Got something. Fen called out, excitement in his voice. Anomalous readings deep in the archives. Looks like, well, I'm not entirely sure what it is. Great, more mysteries, Jax muttered. My favorite. Let's check it out, Vex said, her fingers flying across the controls. Whatever it is, it's our best lead. The mainframe hummed in response. a deep thrumming like the heartbeat of a mechanical beast. Vex watched as the data coalesced into something more tangible, a location, buried deep in the forgotten recesses of the prison. Coordinates, she breathed, a thrill of triumph running through her. We've got a location, great, Jack said, clapping his hands together. Now we just have to get there without getting killed. Piece of cake, Fen said with a grin. We've survived worse. Optimism, Jax noted with a mock frown. What a strange and unfamiliar feeling. Vex stepped back from the console, her mind racing with possibilities. They had a lead, a tenuous one, but a lead nonetheless. Now all they had to do was get there, find whatever the entity was searching for, and somehow convince it to take the cosmic high road. Let's move, she said, leading the way. Time's not exactly on our side. They headed out, leaving Thon behind with a parting glance that promised retribution if he dared interfere. The corridors stretched ahead like a labyrinth, the flickering lights casting long shadows that seemed to dance and twist with malicious glee. As they moved, Vex felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Whatever lay ahead, it was a gamble, a roll of the cosmic dice with stakes higher than she'd ever imagined. But she wasn't alone. She had her crew, her friends, and together they'd face whatever the universe threw their way. Because in the end, that's what mattered, survival even in the heart of darkness. Hey Vex, Jax said, breaking the silence. You ever think about what you do if this all ends in our favor? Like, if we actually make it out of this mess alive? Vex chuckled, the sound a little hollow but genuine nonetheless. Honestly, I'll probably just find another mess to dive into. Figures, Fen said, shaking his head with a smile. Some things never change. Hey, someone's got to keep life interesting, Vex replied, her eyes on the path ahead. And with that, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next with a grin and a grim determination. Because that's what it meant to be human, to fight, to survive, and to never give up, even when the cosmos itself seemed hell-bent on tearing you apart. In the end, they were more than just survivors. They were warriors, cynical, irreverent, and stubborn as hell. And as they pressed on, Vex couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to win after all. The iron circlet was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater in a knife fight. Vex Corin led the way with a determined stride, her crew trailing like a pack of surly cats that had been dunked in ice water. The corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit by the flickering lights that seemed to be on their own cosmic rhythm. It was like being trapped in a rave party programmed by a sadistic AI. You think it's gonna get any worse? Jax asked, his voice a gravelly rumble that matched the rickety hum of the walls. Vex snorted. Oh, I'm sure it can and will. Just wait until the entity decides to redecorate with our entrails. Charming, Fen chimed in from the rear, adjusting his collar like he was heading to a diplomatic meeting instead of a potential massacre. Always a ray of sunshine, Vex. Comes with the territory, she shot back. You want to survive in this tin can, you learn to expect the universe to kick you in the teeth. They moved through the prison's bowels, the tension like a third lung in the room, useless but impossible to ignore. Each step was a gamble, every corner a potential death trap, and Vex felt the weight of it pressing on her shoulders like an overambitious backpack full of bad decisions. The cosmic horror's influence was at its peak, which was just a fancy way of saying things were going from bad to worse. Doors opened into nothingness, lights blinked like they were having epileptic fits, and the ever-present hum of the machinery was now joined by an unsettling groan. It was like the iron circlet itself was complaining about its diet of chaos and despair. So how screwed are we? Jax asked as they dodged a cloud of sparks erupting from a vent. On a scale of 1 to we're all gonna die, Vex quipped. About a 9.5, just half a point short of a full meltdown, Fen noted, his sarcasm barely concealing the anxiety beneath. They pushed onward, though each of them secretly wondered if they were just marching toward their own funerals. But that's the thing about humans, Vex thought, we're stubborn as hell. Even when the universe paints give up in neon letters, we're too dumb to take the hint. Why don't we ever get caught up in nice situations? Jax mused aloud. Like finding a planet made entirely of chocolate or something. Because that would make sense, Vex said, pulling out her wrist display to check their bearings. And we're not in the business of sense. A sudden tremor shook the corridor, tossing them against the walls like so many rag dolls. Vex caught herself with a curse, her fingers leaving sweaty prints on the cold metal. Great. Now the place is getting frisky, Jax muttered, rubbing his elbow where it had connected with an unyielding bulkhead. Must be the entity's way of saying hello, Fen suggested, not quite hiding the nervous flicker in his eyes. More like a full-on grope, Jax replied. And I didn't sign up for that. Whoever built this place sure didn't have cosmic disturbances in mind, Vex noted, picking herself up and gesturing for the others to follow. Or maybe they did. Probably on a dare. They trudged onward, the flickering lights turning the corridor into a scene from a kitschy horror film. A reminder that the real monster wasn't lurking in the shadows but was tearing the very fabric of reality apart. As they approached the coordinates Fen had pulled from the archives, the air grew thicker, like they were wading through invisible molasses. Vex tried not to think about the odds of survival, focusing instead on the now, a moment-to-moment existence that left no room for future planning. Finally, they reached a door marked with a faded plaque. Any text had long since peeled away, leaving nothing but a rectangle of blank metal to greet them. Well, this looks inviting, Jax grumbled, eyeing the door as if it might bite. Only one way to find out what's inside, Vex said, stepping forward with a confidence she didn't feel. She hit the panel to open the door, which swished aside with an agonized screech. The room beyond was moderately sized, filled with the remnants of whatever purpose it once served. Consoles, now dark and unresponsive, lined the walls. A central pedestal held a device that might have once been a scanner or possibly an avant-garde coffee machine. So this is it? Fen asked, peering inside with skepticism. We risked life and limb for a room full of broken tech, looks like it, Vex admitted, stepping inside. But there's gotta be something here. The entity wouldn't be causing all this chaos just for a pile of junk. Ever considered it might just have bad taste? Jax suggested, leaning against the doorway like a bouncer at a particularly exclusive club. Let's find out, Vex replied, moving to the pedestal. Her fingers brushed the dusty surface, and the room shuddered in response. Lights flickered on, bathing them in a sickly green glow. Oh, that's not ominous at all, Fen said, his voice dry as sandpaper. Maybe it's trying to set the mood, Jax added. You know, for when it decides to eat us. Vex rolled her eyes, focusing on the device in front of her. It hummed to life, the screen flickering with bizarre symbols that danced like alien hieroglyphs. Can you make any sense of this? She asked, glancing at Fen, who was already fiddling with his scanner. Not yet, but I'm working on it, he replied, fingers moving deftly over the controls. Give me a minute, famous last words, Jax quipped, earning a glare from Vex. Her attention returned to the device, trying to puzzle out its secrets. The symbols shifted, rearranging themselves in a pattern that seemed almost purposeful, as if they were trying to communicate. Fen, Vex prompted, a hint of urgency in her voice. Anything working on it, he repeated, though his tone was edged with frustration. This tech is ancient. It's like trying to read a book with half the pages missing. Try harder, Jax urged, watching the corridor with a wary eye. I don't want to be here when that thing decides to check on its junk pile. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Vex could sense the pressure, the tension that coiled around her like a serpent waiting to strike. Then Fen let out a low whistle. Got it, he exclaimed, and the room seemed to exhale with relief. What is it? Vex asked, moving closer to peer at the screen. It's a map, Fen explained, eyes alight with discovery, or part of one at least. Shows the prison as it was, or maybe as it's becoming. How's that helpful? Jax asked, skepticism plain in his tone. Because it shows us where the entity's influence is strongest, Fen replied, tapping the display. Which means we can find its core, or whatever's drawing it here. Vex felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. Then we have a chance, so we just stroll over there and ask it to leave politely. Jax asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. Somehow I think it's going to take more than a strongly worded letter. We'll figure it out, Vex said, determination threading through her words. We have to. Assuming we're not turned into cosmic chow first, Fen added, though there was a glimmer of resolve in his eyes too. They had what they needed, an edge, a direction. But the path was fraught with danger, and the entity was unlikely to relinquish its grip without a fight. Time to move, Vex said, closing down the device with a snap. We've got a date with destiny. Hope it's a short one, Jax muttered as they headed back into the corridor. The lights flickered around them, casting shadows that writhed and danced like specters. The iron circlet was coming apart at the seams, the entity's grip tightening with every second. But Vex had her crew, her friends, and together they'd face whatever the universe threw their way. Because that's what it meant to be human, to fight, to survive, and to never give up, even when the cosmos seemed hell-bent on tearing you apart. Hey Vex, Jax said, breaking the silence. You ever think about what you do if this all ends in our favor? Like, if we actually make it out of this mess alive? Vex chuckled, the sound a little hollow but genuine nonetheless. Honestly, I'll probably just find another mess to dive into, figures, Fen said, shaking his head with a smile. Some things never change. Hey, someone's got to keep life interesting, Vex replied, her eyes on the path ahead. And with that they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next with a grin and a grim determination. Because in the end they were more than just survivors. They were warriors, cynical, irreverent, and stubborn as hell. And as they pressed on, Vex couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to win after all. The iron circlet was shaking itself apart like a toddler on a sugar high, and Vex Corin had a front row seat to the disaster show. It wasn't exactly a premium viewing experience. More like standing at the edge of a collapsing star while someone kept poking you with a sharp stick. The corridor's lights flickered with a strobe effect that would have been perfect for an underground rave, and the air smelled of burnt metal and desperation. So, we're really gonna talk to this thing? Jax Slater asked, his voice as gravelly as ever and twice as skeptical. I didn't bring my cosmic horror dictionary. Just stick to the basics. Please, thank you, don't eat us, Vex replied, checking her wrist display one last time to ensure they were heading in the right direction. Not that directions meant much when half the corridors were opening into the void. You think we're gonna get a chance to negotiate? Fen chipped in, his diplomatic veneer crumbling like stale bread. I mean, last I checked, cosmic horrors didn't come with an instruction manual. We've got to try something, Vex said. And it's not like we have a ton of options here. The room they had just left was a dead end in terms of equipment, but it had given them the crucial intel. Somewhere deep in the bowels of this rust bucket was a control point where the entity's influence was most potent. All they had to do was get there, figure out how to communicate, and hope it was in a chatty mood. Assuming we can talk to it, Jax muttered, adjusting his grip on the makeshift weapon he'd cobbled together from spare parts. What are the odds it'll listen? Better than our odds of surviving if we do nothing, Vex shot back. Besides, maybe it just needs a friend. Yeah, because nothing says friendly like tearing reality apart, Jax replied. I'm sure it just wants to play board games and chat about the weather. They rounded a corner, only to be greeted by a security drone, its sensors twitching like a malfunctioning insect. Unfortunately, it wasn't malfunctioning enough to ignore them. The drone buzzed a warning, its weapon systems clicking to life. Guess we're on the menu, Fen commented, ducking as the drone fired a warning shot that left a scorch mark on the wall. Vex didn't waste time. She dove for cover, snapping off a shot with her own weapon. The projectile glanced off the drone's armor, but at least it was distracted. Tava, she yelled into her comm, hoping their resident engineer was still listening. We've got a drone problem, should have known, came Tava Rahan's voice crackling through the static. Try the override on the console I rigged, console's toast, Jax replied as he took his turn to fire back. Got anything else? There was a pause on the line. How about you run? That's usually a good backup plan. Vex grinned despite herself. Why didn't I think of that? She muttered, motioning for her crew to fall back. They retreated, firing as they went, until they managed to duck into an adjoining hallway. The drone, evidently suffering from a bout of indecisiveness, hesitated at the junction, its sensors swiveling in confusion. Must be its first day, Fenn quipped, drawing a rare laugh from Jax. The laughter was short-lived, though. The prison was not in a forgiving mood, and the corridor trembled as if it had just remembered gravity was a thing. A pipe burst somewhere above them, showering them in steam and the smell of burnt circuitry. Place is gonna kill us before the entity even gets a chance, Jax grumbled, shaking water from his hair. Just adds to the ambience, Vex replied. Now how do we get to that control point without becoming space debris? Well, Fenn said, his eyes on the glitchy map, if we take this corridor and pray really hard, we might just make it there in one piece. Great plan, Jax said, sarcasm practically dripping from his words. I feel so secure now. Chin up, boys, Vex said, mustering as much confidence as she could. We're not dead yet. They moved swiftly, the prison groaning around them like a beast in its death throes. The lights dimmed and brightened in a pattern that could only be described as malicious. Every step felt like a gamble. But then again, gambling was what they were best at. As they approached the core of the prison, the air grew heavier, like the atmosphere itself was bowing under the weight of the entity's presence. It felt like trying to breathe through a wet towel. The low hum of machinery was now a constant roar, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Feels like we're walking into the belly of the beast, Jax commented, casting wary glances at the walls as if they might spring to life. Let's just hope it's not snack time, Vex said, her humor a thin veneer over the tension she felt. Fenn, what's the map say? Just a little further, Fenn replied, squinting at the flickering display. Assuming it's not lying to us. No promises, Jax muttered, brushing past a panel that sparked ominously. Finally, they arrived at another door, this one marked by a distinct pulsating glow that seemed to emanate from within. It felt like the threshold to another world, a point of no return. The team exchanged glances, each one laden with unspoken questions and shared resolve. Here goes nothing, Vex murmured, activating the door controls. The door slid open with an ominous hiss, and they stepped inside. The room was unlike the others they'd encountered. Instead of derelict consoles and flickering screens, this space was dominated by a single, massive interface that seemed very much alive. Symbols and shapes danced across its surface, swirling with an alien energy that made the hair on Vex's arm stand up. Well, that's new, Fenn said, eyes wide as he took in the sight. Looks like the entity's got its own little nightclub, Jax joked, though his tone was less amused and more unnerved. Vex approached the interface cautiously, her mind racing. This was it, the focal point of the entity's influence. If they were going to communicate, it had to be here. But how to even start? Any bright ideas? She asked, glancing at Fenn. Maybe we just say hello, Fenn suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. I mean, it's worth a try. Hello, cosmic horror, Jax said, adopting the air of a disgruntled host. Sorry for the mess. Hope you're enjoying your stay, the interface flickered, as if responding to Jax's sarcasm. Symbols shifted and a low hum filled the room, a sound that resonated in their bones. Did it just react? Vex said, her voice barely a whisper. Looks like it, Fenn confirmed, adjusting his scanner for better readings. Keep going. Maybe it's just shy, Jax suggested, taking a step closer. Or maybe it's just as confused as we are. Let's hope it's the first one, Vex said, steeling herself. We need to figure out what it wants. The interface pulsed again, and this time a series of symbols resolved into something more coherent, a pattern that tugged at the edges of comprehension. Vex stared at the symbols, willing them to make sense. It was like trying to read a foreign language while someone was shouting in your ear. But there was something there, a hint of familiarity that tugged at her memory. Wait, Fenn said suddenly, his eyes lighting up. I think I think it's asking for help, help. Jax repeated, incredulous from us. That's like asking a goldfish to solve a calculus problem. Maybe it's not as different from us as we thought, Vex mused, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe it's just trying to survive like we are. The room seemed to hold its breath, the air charged with a sense of anticipation. So what do we do? Jax asked, sounding more serious than usual. We just offer it a shoulder to cry on. No, Vex said, the pieces clicking into place. We find out what it's lost and we give it back. They had no idea what that meant, what the entity could possibly need from them. But it was a direction, a purpose. And in a universe where the odds were stacked against them, sometimes a little purpose was all you needed to tip the scales. All right, Vex said, determination flaring in her chest. Let's see what we can do to fix this mess. As they worked, the iron circlet continued its slow spiral into chaos, the very fabric of reality unraveling around them. But with every symbol they deciphered, every piece they put together, Vex felt the tide beginning to turn. Feels like we're playing with a puzzle that's missing half its pieces, Jax remarked, his focus unwavering despite the stakes. Then we'll just have to improvise, Vex replied, pursuing the symbols like a bloodhound on a scent. The room's energy shifted again, and for a moment the chaos outside seemed to still, as if the prison itself was holding its breath. The lights dimmed, casting long shadows that flickered across their faces. Hope you know what you're doing, Fenn said, though his voice held a note of trust. Don't we all, Vex replied, her eyes never leaving the interface. With every second the plan crystallized, crazy, dangerous, and possibly suicidal, but it was all they had. They would communicate, they would find out what the entity needed, and they would somehow give it back. Because that's what humans did, rash, stupid, and full of heart. Here's hoping the universe has a sense of humor, Jax said, as they prepared for the next step in their madcap plan. Or at least a little mercy, Fenn added. And so they worked, side by side, racing against time and the unraveling cosmos. With each breakthrough, the entity's grip seemed to loosen, the chaos ebbing away to reveal a glimpse of order amidst the madness. It wasn't much, just a glimmer of hope in a starless sky. But in the heart of the iron circlet, that hope burned bright enough to light their way, and Vex knew they would either save themselves or go out fighting. Let's get this done, Vex said, determination burning in her eyes. Ready when you are, boss, Jax replied, and together they stepped into the breach. Because sometimes in the darkest moments, that's where you find the light. The control room continued to hum like a beehive on the brink of implosion, symbols flickering across the massive interface like a cosmic slot machine. Vex Corin stood before it, her mind racing with possibilities and her heart pounding with the weight of impending failure. So, boss lady, you think we can sweet-talk this thing, or are we just gonna end up its cosmic chew toy? Jax Slater asked, scratching at the stubble on his chin like it owed him credits. Optimism, Jax. It's a hell of a drug, Vex replied, eyes locked on the interface. But if we're lucky, maybe it'll settle for a handshake instead of a snack. If it's got hands, that is, Fenn chimed in, his attempts at humor slipping through his usually diplomatic demeanor. I mean, what if it's more of a tentacles kind of entity? Great. Just what we need, Jax groaned. The universe's version of an over-enthusiastic squid. As Vex studied the symbols, a pattern began to emerge, a tragic tale wrapped in the language of the cosmos. It spoke of loss, of something torn from the entity's very essence. She rubbed her temples, the information seeping into her consciousness like an unwelcome guest. I think it's lost something, she said aloud, the pieces clicking into place like a puzzle designed by a sadist. Something important, important like a cosmic car key or important like a piece of its soul, Fenn asked, leaning over her shoulder. Let's just say the latter makes more sense, considering it's not trying to unlock a spaceship, Vex replied dryly. Jax threw up his hands. So we're dealing with an entity having an existential crisis, seems like it, Vex said. Which means we have an opening. Great, Jax said with a sardonic grin. All we need now is a couch and some tissues, and we can start charging for therapy sessions. Vex took a deep breath, the gravity of their situation hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. We need to convince it to stop this chaos, to help it find what it's lost. And how do we do that? Fen asked, skepticism threading his voice. We're not exactly equipped with a cosmic lost and found. Vex hesitated, then spoke with conviction. We show it we understand, that we've been there in one way or another. You mean appeal to its non-existent heart? Jax raised an eyebrow. Something like that, Vex said, glancing at the interface. We're all trying to survive, right? Maybe it just needs to know it's not alone. All right, Jax said, cracking his knuckles. Let's pour our hearts out to the interstellar horror show. The room seemed to pulse with anticipation as Vex took a step closer to the interface. Her thoughts crystallized into a message, one imbued with the raw, unvarnished essence of humanity's struggle. We understand loss, she began, her voice steady. We know what it's like to be incomplete, to reach for something that feels a million light years away. The symbols on the interface shifted, responding to her words like they were catching fragments of a forgotten melody. We've fought for survival, clawed our way from oblivion more times than I can count, Vex continued, her voice rising. Maybe you're lost, maybe you're scared. But we can help each other. Not exactly Shakespeare, but it'll do, Jax muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the swirling symbols. The interface glowed brighter, the alien energy coalescing into something almost tangible. It was as if the entity was listening, considering their offer like an ancient judge weighing the scales. Feels like we're talking to a demigod with a hangover, Fen observed, arms crossed. Then let's hope it's feeling generous, Vex replied, her gaze unwavering. There was a pause, a breathless moment where the universe seemed to teeter on the edge of chaos and order. And then the room shifted, the overwhelming energy ebbing like a tide drawn by an unseen moon. It's working, Fen said, disbelief coloring his words. It's actually working. Maybe it's decided not to eat us after all, Jax said with a relieved chuckle. Vex felt a surge of hope, a rare currency in their line of work. They could do this, they could pull it off. With a newfound determination, she reached out mentally, offering a thread of connection to the entity. We can help you find what you've lost, she pledged, her words echoing in the silent communication. But you need to stop tearing this place apart. Work with us. The response was slow, a ripple of understanding that spread through the room and into their minds. It was as if the entity had exhaled, releasing its hold on the iron Circlet systems. Is it just me, or did it just say okay without actually saying anything? Jax asked, peering at the now stabilizing interface. Feels like it, Vex said, a smile breaking through the tension. We just made first contact with a cosmic horror and it didn't kill us. Guess we have a new friend, Fen added, relief evident in his voice. Just what I always wanted, Jax said, sarcasm lacing his words. A buddy who can collapse reality on a whim. Let's not get too cozy, Vex warned, though her relief was palpable. We still need to help it find what it's missing. Otherwise, it might change its mind. The lights in the room steadied, the chaotic flickering subsiding into a softer, more rhythmic glow. It was like standing in the eye of a storm, surrounded by calm even as the universe continued to thrash beyond their fragile bubble of peace. So, what's the next step, boss? Jax asked, his gravelly voice more relaxed now. First, we need to figure out what's missing from its essence, Vex said, considering their options. There's got to be something here, something it's connected to. The prison's databases might have something, Fen suggested. Maybe records from when this place was built, if they are not completely fried. Let's hope Tava left something intact for us to dig through, Vex said, feeling the weight of urgency pressing down once more. Tava's a miracle worker, but even she's got her limits, Jax noted, moving toward the nearest console. Still, worth a shot. As they began sifting through the fragmented data, the room fell into a companionable silence, punctuated only by the occasional muttered curse or sarcastic remark. It was the kind of focused chaos they thrived in the edge of disaster where miracles were born. Found something, Finn announced after a while, his voice cutting through the quiet. Looks like there were some unusual materials brought in during the construction. Unusual how? Vex asked, peering over his shoulder. Unusual as in weird cosmic artifacts with unknown properties, kind of unusual, Finn replied, scrolling through the data. Well, that sounds exactly like what we need, Jack said, his skepticism unable to fully mask his interest. Where are they? Deep storage, Finn answered, pointing to the location on the map. Of course, it's in the most inconvenient place possible. Vex sighed, rubbing her temples. All right, let's go have a look. Maybe we'll find something that'll resonate with our new friend. Let's hope it's not another tentacle monster in disguise, Jack said, though he was already heading for the door. They moved quickly, the corridors of the iron circlet now eerily calm as the entity's influence waned. It was a fragile peace, like the silence after a particularly brutal storm, leaving them wary of the next tempest. Feels strange, doesn't it? Finn remarked as they navigated the twisted hallways, like walking through a graveyard that's forgotten its dead. Cheerful as ever, Finn, Jack said, though there was no bite to his words. But you're not wrong. As they reached the entrance to deep storage, Vex's wrist display flickered to life, the map confirming they were in the right place. Here goes nothing, she muttered, activating the door controls. The door hissed open, revealing rows of sealed containers and crates. Looks like someone's forgotten basement, Jax commented, his eyes scanning the room. Except instead of dust, it's full of cosmic mystery boxes. They fanned out, searching for anything that might be connected to the entity's missing piece. Vex's eyes landed on a container marked with symbols that matched the ones on the interface. Over here, she called, motioning them over. This might be it. Let's crack it open and see what nightmares are inside, Jax said, moving to help her with the container's locks. With a hiss of released pressure, the lid swung open, revealing an object nestled within, an intricate crystalline structure that seemed to hum with a life of its own. Well, that's definitely not from around here, Finn said, staring at the structure with a mix of awe and trepidation. Feels like it's singing, Vex said, reaching out but stopping short, aware of the potential danger. Think this is what it's missing? Jax shrugged. Only one way to find out. Let's introduce it to the entity and see if they hit it off. They carefully extracted the object, its surface shifting with an otherworldly light. As they carried it back to the control room, the atmosphere seemed to shift again, the entity's presence brushing against their minds like a curious, cautious touch. Hope it's feeling friendly, Finn murmured, his earlier tension returning. Back in the control room, Vex approached the interface, holding the crystalline structure up for the entity to see or sense, whatever worked. Here's your missing piece, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. This is what you've been looking for, right? The interface reacted immediately, the symbols flaring with intensity as if rejoicing. The crystalline structure glowed in response, resonating with the entity's energy in a symphony of light and sound. Looks like we've got a match, Jax said, watching the display with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Didn't think we'd actually pull it off. Let's not jinx it, Vex said, though her smile was genuine. But yeah, it looks like we did. As the entity reconnected with its missing piece, the iron circlet shuddered once, as if shaking off a bad dream. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving the team standing in a room that felt, if not safe, then at least stable. Guess we're not dead, Finn said, a grin breaking through his usual calm. Always a plus in my book, Vex nodded, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd reached out to an alien consciousness and found a way to communicate, to understand. Feels like we should be celebrating with champagne, Jax remarked, running a hand through his hair. Assuming we had any, that is. Maybe once we're off this rust bucket, Vex said, her mind already turning to the challenges ahead. We've still got a prison to clean up and a lot of explaining to do. Looking forward to that, Jax said, his tone dry as ever. But for now, let's just enjoy not being space dust. As they left the control room, the entity's presence faded, leaving behind a sense of gratitude that resonated in their minds. It was a strange, humbling feeling, knowing they'd made a difference in the vast, uncaring expanse of the universe. "Here's to humanity," Vex said with a wry smile. "Making friends with cosmic horrors and surviving to tell the tale." With that, they walked down the corridor, into whatever uncertain future awaited them, ready to face it with the same reckless bravery that had gotten them this far, and the camaraderie that would see them through anything else the universe had in store. Vex Corin stood at the entrance to the Iron Circlet's makeshift command hub, watching as the ragtag group of prisoners and guards patched up the place. It was like trying to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, but hey, at least they were trying. The flickering lights had finally steadied, casting a dull orange glow over their earnest efforts. "Look at him," Jack Slater said, sidling up with a grin that suggested he'd just told a joke only he found funny. "Like ants trying to fix a broken hill with spit and grit. Better than us sitting on our asses waiting for the whole thing to collapse," Vex replied, though she couldn't help but share a smirk with him. "I mean, nothing screams productive day like averting an existential calamity, right?" Jax chuckled, the sound as gravelly as the asteroid belt outside. "Gotta say, for a cosmic horror, our buddy's got a real knack for leaving a mess behind." The entity, now a somewhat benign presence, had retreated to the depths of the prison's systems, a dormant guardian or a spectral janitor, depending on who you asked. Vex had no illusions about the thing's motives. It was as inscrutable as ever, but whatever made it stop short of devouring them was good enough for her. Fen, ever the diplomat, was busy trying to keep the peace between the once rioting prisoners and the still panicked guards. He walked over, his eyes darting like a cautious rabbit in a den of wolves. "You know, this might be the first time in weeks I haven't felt like someone's about to shiv me in the back. Give it a minute," Jack said, tapping his comm to stop it from squawking random static. "I'm sure someone'll ruin the vibe soon enough." Vex shook her head, amusement dancing at the corners of her eyes. "Fen's right, though. Everyone's surprisingly cooperative. Must be the shared trauma. Or maybe they're just saving their energy for later," Fen suggested, a touch of his usual humor creeping back in. "Never underestimate the power of a good, old-fashioned grudge." "Speaking of grudges," Vex said, glancing at the control station where Tava Rehin was deep in her work, "I've got to hand it to Tava. She's turning this scrap heap back into something almost resembling a functional facility. Miracle worker, that one," Jax agreed. "Give her a toaster and a screwdriver and she'll probably fix the entire universe." They watched as Tava, oblivious to their praise, cursed at a stubborn console. It sparked in protest, and she responded with a creative string of invective. It was almost poetic in a grimy space station way. "So what's next, fearless leader?" Jax asked, turning his attention back to Vex. "Are we really gonna trust that thing to play nice?" Vex sighed, a weary sound that spoke volumes about her distrust of cosmic entities and their newfound friendship. "Trust isn't exactly the word I'd use, but we've got some leverage now. It wants to be left alone, we want the same." "Call it a truce. A truce with a horror from beyond reality," Fen mused. "Not exactly how I pictured my Thursday going." "Could be worse," Vex said, recalling the many ways things could have ended in blood and vacuum. "We could have been vaporized or turned into some kind of alien soup." "Now there's a positive spin," Jax said, shaking his head. "So, when do we get to drink the non-existent champagne?" "After we've convinced Command that this place is worth salvaging," Vex replied, pulling out her wrist display to check the status reports. "And after convincing them we're not all insane." "Good luck with that," Fen said. "They already think we're a few screws short of a toolkit." As the cleanup continued, Vex found herself reflecting on the fragility of peace, the delicate balance they'd struck with the entity. It was a cosmic dance between chaos and order, and they were all just trying not to trip over their own feet. The door to the central hub opened with a hiss, and a familiar face walked in. Graves, the guard with a face like a kicked-in pumpkin. His expression was as dire as ever, though maybe a bit more relaxed than she'd seen before. "Things are finally shaping up out there," Graves said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Not that I'm thanking any of you for it." "Wouldn't dream of it, Graves," Jax replied. "Your gratitude would probably kill us all." "Gratitude, what's that again?" Graves retorted with a snort. "Just here to let you know the security drones are back online, mostly not trying to kill us this time." "Glad to know they are on their best behavior," Vex said dryly. "Keep them in check. The last thing we need is more chaos." Graves gave a curt nod, then turned to leave. "Keep doing whatever it is you're doing. Just don't let it get us all killed." As he left, the irony wasn't lost on Vex. They were all walking a tightrope, but at least it wasn't fraying beneath their feet anymore. For now, they could breathe. "Feels like we should do something to commemorate this," Fenn suggested, once Graves was out of earshot. "Maybe a plaque or something." "How about we didn't die, the Iron Circlet's motto," Jax offered. "Add a disclaimer, yet," Vex added with a wry grin. "We might need it." The truth was, they were all too aware of how precarious their situation remained. The Iron Circlet was a ticking time bomb held together by spit, duct tape, and the sheer stubbornness of its denizens. But as they stood together in the midst of it all, Vex couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Not the naive, rosy kind, but the gritty, hard-won hope of survivors. The kind that said, "We've been through hell and back and we're still standing." They'd confronted the darkness and not only survived but made it blink first. In a universe that seemed hell-bent on their annihilation, that was something to celebrate. "So what now?" Jax asked, leaning against a console with an air of casual defiance. "Do we just sit around waiting for the next cosmic conundrum?" Vex shook her head, a plan already forming in her mind. "Now we rebuild, get this place stable again, make sure the entity knows we're not here to poke it with a stick. And when command finally shows up," Fenn inquired, his diplomatic mask slipping back on. "How do we explain all this?" "We tell them the truth," Vex said, surprising herself with how decisive she sounded. "We faced something beyond understanding and came out the other side. They can't argue with results." "And if they do?" Jax asked. "Then we'll do what we always do," Vex replied. "Adapt, survive. Keep moving forward." The dim glow of the Iron Circlet seemed to pulse in agreement, a heartbeat in metal and circuitry. They were far from out of the woods or the void, but they'd found a path through the chaos, and for now that was enough. "To the Iron Circlet," Vex said, raising an imaginary glass. "May it stay in one piece long enough for us to get off this rock." "Cheers to that," Jax said, clinking his own invisible glass. They laughed, a sound that echoed through the battered corridors, carrying with it the resilience of humanity. In the end, it wasn't about the cosmic horrors or the crumbling prison. It was about them, the people who refused to bow to the darkness. And in that defiance they found strength. Together they would face whatever came next, armed with a newfound understanding of the universe and their place within it. As they turned back to the task at hand, Vex felt a sense of resolve settle over her. They'd taken the first step into the unknown and lived to tell the tale. Now, it was time to forge their own path, one stubborn, irreverent step at a time.